Hello, online pipe community. This is Ethan, Parsimonious Piper, and once again this week I am together with,
Otter Piper.
and we are covering the very next letter. I think we're up to 14 in C.S. Lewis Screwtape letters. Father Brian, take it away.
My dear Wormwood, the most alarming thing in your last account of the patient is that he is making none of those confident resolutions which marked his original conversion. No more lavish promises of perpetual virtue. I gather not even the expectation of an endowment of grace for life, but only a hope for the daily and hourly pittance to meet the daily and hourly temptation. This is very bad. I see only one thing to do at the moment. Your patient has become humble. Have you drawn his attention to the fact? All virtues are less formidable to us once the man is aware that he has them. But this is especially true of humility. Catch him at the moment when he is really poor in spirit and smuggle into his mind the gratifying reflection, by Jove, I'm being humble. And almost immediately pride at his own humility, will appear. If he awakes to the danger and tries to smother this new form of pride, make him proud of his attempt, and so on, through as many stages as you please. But don't try this too long, for fear you awake his sense of humor and proportion, in which case he will merely laugh at you and go to bed. But there are other profitable ways of fixing his attention on the virtue of humility. By this virtue, as by all the others, our enemy wants to turn the man's attention away from self to him and to the man's neighbors. All the abjection and self-hatred are designed, in the long run, solely for this end. Unless they attain this end, they do us little harm, and they may even do us good if they keep the man concerned with himself. And above all, if self-contempt can be made the starting point for contempt of other selves, and thus for gloom, cynicism, and cruelty. You must therefore conceal from the patient the true end of humility. Let him think of it not as self-forgetfulness, but as a certain kind of opinion, namely a low opinion of his own talents and character. Some talents, I gather, he really has. Fix in his mind the idea that humility consists in trying to believe those talents to be less valuable than he believes them to be. No doubt they are, in fact, less valuable than he believes, but this is not the point. The great thing is to make him value an opinion for some quality other than truth, thus introducing an element of dishonesty and make believe into the heart of what otherwise threatens to become a virtue. By this method, thousands of humans have been brought to think that humility means pretty women trying to believe they are ugly and clever men trying to believe they are fools. And since what they are trying to believe may, in some cases, be manifest nonsense, they cannot succeed in believing it. And we have the chance of keeping their minds endlessly revolving on themselves in an effort to achieve the impossible. To anticipate the enemy's strategy, we must consider his aims. The enemy wants to bring the man to a state of mind in which he could design the best cathedral in the world and know it to be the best, and rejoice in the fact, without being any more or less, or otherwise glad at having it done than he would if it had been done by another. The enemy wants him, in the end, to be so free from any bias in his own favor that he can rejoice in his own talents as frankly and gratefully as in his neighbor's talents, or in a sunrise, an elephant, or a waterfall. He wants each man in the long run to be able to recognize all creatures, even himself, as glorious and excellent things. He wants to kill their animal self-love as soon as possible, but it is his long-term policy, I fear, to restore them to a new kind of self-love, a charity and gratitude for all selves, including their own. When they have really learned to love their neighbors as themselves, they will be allowed to love themselves as their neighbors. For we must never forget what is the most repellent and inexplicable trait in our enemy. He really loves the hairless bipeds he has created, and always gives back to them what his right hand, with his right hand, what he has taken away with his left. His whole effort, therefore, will be to get the man's mind off the subject of his own value altogether. He would rather the man thought himself a great architect or a great poet and then forget about it, that he should spend much time and pains trying to think himself a bad one. Your efforts to instill either vainglory or false modesty into the patient will therefore be met from the enemy's side with the obvious reminder that a man is not usually called upon to have an opinion of his own talents at all, since he can very well go on improving them to the best of his ability without deciding on his own precise niche in the temple of fame. You must try to exclude this reminder from the patient's consciousness at all costs. The enemy will also try to render real in the patient's mind a doctrine which they all profess, but find it difficult to bring home to their feelings. The doctrine that they did not create themselves, that their talents were given them, that they might as well be proud of the color of their hair. But always, and by all methods, the enemy's aim will be to get the patient's mind off of such questions, and yours will be to fix it on them. Even of his sins, the enemy does not want him to think too much. Once they are repented, the sooner the man turns his attention outward, the better the enemy is pleased. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Very interesting the way he attacks humility here. Screwtape, that is. And the way that C.S. Lewis uses this to teach us what humility is and what it is not. Right off the bat, he's talking about humility in a way that brought to mind, actually, to both of us. You remember that it was Mother Teresa's quote that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And Screwtape goes on, Lewis does through Screwtape, to really explain what he means by this. God wants us to be humble. He does not want us to think incorrectly of ourselves, to think that we are not good at something that we are in fact good at. That's a sort of false humility that keeps us in a mind frame where as he points out, where we're focused on something that is a lie. And that is not, that's no more healthy than being prideful of the talents that you have. And it's no more conducive to us being able to function in the world. Lewis continually brings back each of these different concepts to this notion of us and our interactions with other people, that the object of humility is for us to get rid of, as Lewis calls it, this animal self-love that is selfish and inwardly focused. And instead, when we are humble, when we recognize our relationship in the universe to the creator of that universe, and yet we understand that he loves us hairless bipeds, as he called us, that God loves us. That's the self-love, the healthy self-love that we need, that we can then in turn spread to the people that we come in contact with. Screwtape wants to avoid this at all costs because he doesn't want us he helping and loving other people and being kind to them. That doesn't serve his purpose of destroying our souls in the slightest. But that's where real humility comes in. The example that Lewis gave of the architect struck a chord with me because as a church musician, I can say with neither pride nor false humility, I'm a good pianist. I'm not a great pianist. I'm not a concert pianist, and I'm not a classically trained pianist. But for church music, I'm good. I recognize my strengths and weaknesses. I certainly have some of both. I can enjoy sitting down and listening to someone else do what it is that I do and do it really well. And I thoroughly, I'm consumed by that. I can enjoy it endlessly. Now, this brings us to one of the humorous points in here, and that is that now I've demonstrated humility, and I'm proud of it. but but the ability to enjoy a talent that you have in someone else in the same way that you would enjoy it in yourself is, for me, in fact, that was the start of losing some of that pride and performance orientedness in my playing for worship services, and to get the focus off of me. And so this one did strike home a bit there. I did, like I said, I just find it very interesting, this focus that he makes on humility, not being falsely thinking lowly of yourself, and trying to see the good things about you in the same way that God does.
Lewis really challenged me to to think about humility, and it's not that I didn't know it before, but you know, anytime something we know is brought back to our attention, it's done so with more life experience, uh, and so, and I would, the the viewers that are going to view, this this episode, if you have the book, I'd read it a few more times, because most of us, and I will speak of myself, it is so easy to just have a skewed understanding of humility, and I know for myself, because humility by the world is seen as weakness. It's supposed to be tepid people that really aren't sure of certain things, and they let everybody else go first in line or whatever it might be. And as you mentioned, Ethan, with the piano playing, um, you're able to look at and you're able to see the reality of that. You enjoy doing it, you do it well, but you also recognize the reality that you're not going to compare yourself to I'm going to get a name. Ixop Perlman? No, was he a pian? Well, or a famous pianist, Mozart or something.
He was a violinist, but he was an awfully good one.
There you go. I had a hunch he wasn't a pianist, but you're able to recognize the reality, and looking at humility, and because Screwtape wants us to, he either wants us to be self-deprecating to a point that's not real, or he wants us to puff ourselves up, which is not real. And humility is, as Lewis says, humility is recognizing that I didn't create myself. My talents are for me. I do have to participate if I want them to get better, but they come from him first and foremost. But they come from him for us to be able to recognize his glory, and to be able to recognize it in other people, and to be able to see how Screwtape wants to play around with that with us, wants to tempt us to go to either extremes, and not to look at reality for what it is.
Well, and uh, an example of a pianist would be somebody like a Van Cliburn, um, or a Billy Joel, an Elton John, people who are widely recognized as being great pop pianists. And to that point, this talent is God given. Yes, there is effort that goes into that level, any level of achievement, really. But make no mistake, people who have achieved a concert proficiency like a Van Cliburn have spent thousands of hours drilling their fingers, doing boring things that strengthen their fingers and their minds and the connection between the two. No question about that. But there is a level of God-given ability to even go there, to start off with enough ability to be able to reach those heights yourself. Uh, I've unfortunately I've never actually gotten to know personally someone who was a concert pianist, because it would be interesting to observe their character. I have known a couple of very good traveling gigging pianists, and they were phenomenal guys who were quite welcoming of me, and amused themselves whenever they would let me play along. So, it was always nice of them. At any rate, the yeah, this notion that we're not created, and recognizing our place in the total scheme of things. I think this is the most dangerous to Screwtape and Wormwood and their designs on us, because it's that recognition that keeps us from a false self-deprecating um, sort of humility that isn't truly humility. It's simply self-loathing, and but it also keeps us from the opposite type of false humility, the prideful, and lets us focus both our talents, our time, and this new self love that we have on other people around us.
Something that came to mind, and this is totally unscripted. Uh, the Muhammad Ali. I'm the greatest of all times, and he would say, "Oh, I'm the best." And I don't know him personally, so I can never. And it just came to mind to think of that. Now, that could also be tactics to be able to get in the mind of your other person. Um, yeah, not that I have a resolution with it, but it just came to mind that because putting aside the fact that it could have been tactics for what he needed to do, but like you said, to be able to recognize your own greatness is ultimately to be able to recognize the greatness of others. That's what he said. That's what Lewis taught, the greatness of others. And ultimately, it's the greatness of God. And whether it's Muhammad Ali or I think you said Van Cliburn, if I said I'm not,
Yes.
I would think somebody like who truly is at a pinnacle of a talent that you would hope, but you would think that they enjoy so much what they do. They hopefully recognize this is a talent beyond their own measure, but yet obviously they put the time in. You would want them to enjoy the talent of someone else, as you mentioned in your own example, to be able to play alongside someone,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be that someone who knows the fact that you're not at their level, but that's not their measurement. They
Mm-hmm.
they recognize and enjoy what you're doing, and because the Screwtape will go to the opposite end. He'll,
Yeah.
if I was in your place, I'm not a pianist, and I could so easily you get with somebody who's like a concert pianist. Screwtape's already going to work on me because he's gonna have me downplay myself so that I my ego doesn't get hurt when I already know I wouldn't play at this level, but there's a lack of humility right there if to do that, to self-deprecate to that point.
And an opening for things like envy and jealousy to
Mm-hmm.
come in when if you can't just appreciate the beauty of something for itself, and the talent of someone else, and it would be very easy to let those things creep in addition to uh, the self-deprecating false humility. most certainly.
Maybe the last thing I'll mention that it comes because we talked about it earlier is to be able to have a self forgetfulness that
Mm.
is not damaging. That it is because with Christ, with God, a self forgetfulness is not damaging, unlike the way Screwtape would want to use it, where
Mm.
it's not only damaging to us, but it'll be damaging to other people. It's a thought. It's something that really can be discerned a lot more for me.
Well, yeah, that self forgetfulness doesn't mean that you're not caring for yourself, just that you're not putting yourself first. And as so many of these chats, they really do focus back in on keeping us from being able to, in turn, um, focus our attention on the needs of other people around us. And that really is, one of God's primary purposes for us uh, is uh, is meeting other people's needs and being able to take the blessings that He's given us and spread those around us. So, well, thank you very much again for a wonderful chat, folks. I hope that you have gotten something out of this, and that you don't fall like I did into that pride of being humble. Um, and in the meantime, do light something you like. We will see you next week.